Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. Sometimes, often in fact, people who chase business success may reach financial goals and build businesses they're proud of. And then one day they figure out they're kind of lost or unhappy, maybe dissatisfied, maybe financially successful, but otherwise kind of something's eluding them. Maybe that's because their idea of success wasn't really true to their own values and their own purpose. They were chasing someone else's idea of success. Now, my guest today has been exactly there, and he's done exactly that. And now he helps entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals build the business and life that they really want. He's an entrepreneur who's built and sold successful businesses and then went on to build a successful life. Please welcome our entrepreneur, coach, family man, Mr. Daryl Sweeney. Daryl, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Hey, was that accurate? Was that
yeah,
about
man,
right?
That's spot on. I was like, man, that sounds pretty good.
That's good. That's good. No, I've been looking forward to this because I know that this has been a very crazy year, but I'm really looking forward to rejoining humanity. How are you doing, Daryl? Like, well, how's your year been? What are you up to? What's going on? And how'd you get to where you are right now?
You're right. The pandemic has sucked in so many ways and on so many levels for so many people. And I think for a lot of us, especially those of us that are doing pretty well, it's really natural to want to look at someone else and compare something else. Say somebody else has it harder. I shouldn't be complaining. So in my family, sometimes we have to remind ourselves that, hey, there are things that suck. There are things that have been hard for us. I have a son with cystic fibrosis. It's a lung disease. And because of that, we shut things down. I mean, our house was our compound. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. We cleaned groceries before they came into the house. I mean, it was nutty, things I never imagined myself doing.
You had the full airlock going, right?
All of it. I'm watching my friends and my neighbors, the people I hang out with, spend time with, and have a lot of fun with, still seeing each other, still getting together as they form their own little pod. And in a lot of ways, it felt like we were on an island. But over this past year, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I've watched my boys grow right before my eyes. I've seen their resiliency firsthand. I've seen their approach to education. I've seen the way they've learned lessons up close, right? Not in the couple hours to get them out the door in the morning and the few hours to get them, tucked in to bed when they get home. So while the pandemic has certainly been rough in a lot of ways, there's also a lot of gifts professionally, personally. There are a lot of gifts that as we come out of this, I'm thankful. Please hear that I'm thankful that we're coming out of it. But I'm also thankful for the gifts that it provided for me and mine.
You say a lot of gifts, and that's, I like the way that you use that word, that there's been a lot of gifts, because it is something that, I think seeing every day to be as something to be grateful for, and coming out of this with the experiences and, however your family has grown or your business has grown or changed, every one of those changes is a gift in some way. It changes the way that you look at your life. It changes the way that things are moving forward. I've had a nutty year as well. But all in all, I got to tell you, and I'm not, I'm not afraid to say this now, it's been a really good year for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it has. I just got closer with my girls, with my family, right? I don't know if they would admit to that, but it's true. They're teenagers, what are you going to do? And I grew as an employee and as a skilled, communicator, business person. And a lot of that's because of this show. The people that I'm talking to, the kind of, and I don't like to call it work, but the time I'm spending and the conversations I'm having, just kind of, some of it has made it into through my skull and kind of permeated into my work habits. And hopefully I'm bringing a lot of what I learned back to my day jobs. I've changed jobs since we last talked. So, and, I was working for one major company. I started to do some other stuff, and now I'm working for another major company. But, it's like I love my life. I love the way that all that is going. And my company now, they know what I started during the shutdown. They know that I embarked on my own creative journey, and they're totally supportive of it. And, and I think that marks a difference in the way that companies are employing people and looking at people. They're saying, look, it's a remote job anyway, but this is the world we live in. We want our employees to be people, not just cogs in a wheel. This is your rounded personage, your whole self. And, as long as that silly podcasting that you're doing isn't, like political or, going to endanger the reputation of the company, by all means, continue to do what you do. So I've always felt really supported by them. But, it's been a journey. Now, when we met, was probably 5 or 6 months ago, first time. And we had decided to get on the show together. But, circumstances intervene and we had to postpone once or twice. But I'm really glad we're together now. And I wanted really people to hear your story, Daryl, because it's really fascinating. You started a couple of great businesses, some people might have even heard of, and that propelled you towards a different definition, a different concept of what happiness is. So can you start, just tell us about your journey? How'd you get there?
Yeah, it's always interesting and always smile when people ask, because I can see it now, and for so long as I'm moving kind of throughout my journey, it didn't always make a lot of sense the way things were connected. So clear today, but when I started. So longtime entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. When I went to college, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was going to start businesses, run businesses, build teams. And I'm really fortunate because that's what I ended up doing. I actually started my very first business a year out of college. And, we brought a product to market. It was a college buddy of mine and we brought a product to market. It was a bedpost shelf. We had made them when we were in college out of wood. We found an engineer and we launched this product into the ethos. And what's crazy about that when I look back with such fondness because we had no idea what we were doing. In fact, I'll never forget, I'm working and I get a phone call from my friend and he's living in New York. I'm living in Louisville, Kentucky. And he says, hey, I found one of those old shelves we made in college. And, I called up Invention Submission Corporation. They cut me a deal and it only cost me $1,000. And they're going to help me market it and they're going to help me build it and they're going to help me sell it. And it's going to be great. And he tells the story, says that I told him, well, I think there's good news and bad news. The good news is, or the bad news is, I think you lost $1,000. The good news is, if we want to do this, let's just do it. Let's figure it out. And that's what we did. We literally found an engineer in the back of the book. We got CAD drawings. We found a sourcing agent. We ordered 10,000 of these things from China. They come over on a boat. They land in Louisville, Kentucky. We store them in a buddy of mine's house that he's planning on tearing down. And, when all this happened, I remember as I would tell people back then what we were doing, they would say, oh, that's great. How'd you get your pre-orders? Who's bought these things ahead of time? Who are you going to be working with?
You're like living Shark Tank.
And Shark Tank would have a lot of questions for me about this time of the story. So they're asking me these questions and I'm like, what do you mean pre-orders? What do you mean partnerships? We're going to get them in. We're going to call Target or one of these big stores. We're going to tell them what we have. And because this product is so great, it's this bedpost shelf. It helps college kids for their alarm clocks and their glasses and all the stuff they need on the top bunk. It's going to be great. They're going to love it. Well, of course they didn't love it. They didn't love us. They didn't have any faith or confidence in us. So now we're sitting on 10,000 of these things, not knowing what to do with them. So we just started hustling. We started knocking on college bookstores' doors. We started making visits. And next thing you know, fast forward about a year later of selling these things a case at a time, convincing people, try them. I think they'll do well. We're in 350 college bookstores all over the country. We're ordering multiple containers of these things. We end up in the Bed Bath & Beyonds. We end up in Container Store. We end up having relationships with these big national retailers. And that really catapulted us into launching a second company, which was an e-commerce play. And we sold anything and everything for college kids living on campus.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and it was great. We built a team. We sold over 4,000 products, built a team. We're shipping hundreds of packages every single day. We're building offices and warehouses in Louisville, and things are going really well. And I was convinced that this is what success looked and felt like. I was convinced this entrepreneurship thing was a lot easier than everybody made it out to be. And everything just felt like it fell into place. This was also the time that we started to hit some of our first major challenges, one of those being relationship with my partner. We had very different ideas and attitudes towards leadership, and that caused a rift. And there's some big lessons learned there. And eventually, long story short, I ended up buying him out, but a lot of learning there. And I bought him out literally right before We got into the big recession. So if you think back 2008,
Uh-huh.
2009,
Yeah.
and we had a great business though. It didn't impact us. So we're running full speed ahead. It was a very seasonal business. If you remember, I said we sold anything and everything to college students. So we did a
Mhm.
lot of business in the summer months. So very seasonal. To manage cash flow, we use credit lines. We would borrow going into the season, make a
Mhm.
bunch of money through the summer, pay them back 2 or 3 months later, and that was that. And we'd do it all over again. And that was just how we managed the business. And because of the recession, the banks came back and claimed all the credit lines. So I spent the next 2 years running a business with no cash flow. Not with no cash flow, but with no cash.
Mhm.
That's when I learned about what grace looks like in business. That's what I learned what creativity looks like in business. That's how I learned to have really hard conversations with a team that I cared deeply about and didn't have the funds to pay them. That's how I learned, how to make partnerships work and how to still keep suppliers and partners willing to send you stuff by getting creative and working out different arrangements and payment structures. So I did that for 2 years. This is the hardest 2 years I've ever spent in business.
But you managed to keep it all going for 2 years
Yeah.
in spite of those challenges or because of those challenges. I don't know. I don't know. It seems to me you're sort of driven in some
It
way.
felt in spite of, I can look back and talk today about the lessons and the growth and the learning, but then it was hard. I mean, I woke up at 3 a.m. every morning. I had, it's every time the phone would ring, I would expect it to be another creditor talking about another bill that we hadn't paid or we needed to pay or was going to collections or something like that. And it was hard. And we got fortunate. We kept the business going and we kept the brand alive to the point that we positioned it to sell. We ended up selling the business to a group out of New York that kept that business going for a very long time. And when I say sell, I don't want to glamorize the word sell. Sell was they paid us some money to pay off some debt.
Yeah, that's it's a very typical story for a first-time entrepreneur. For actually, like a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, most fail, right? Most
Yeah,
fail
yeah,
outright.
yeah.
But for someone who actually built the biz and turned it around, and if you could get out with all your with everything that you went into it, plus a little bit more, I think you count yourself lucky. I
Yeah.
mean, for that first shot out there.
Yeah, we were fortunate. And look, here's the best part. We were talking about gifts of the pandemic not long ago. One of the gifts of this business was things were so tough at work. And I poured everything into work. I considered work, I put relationships off to the side because I said, I'm going to build this business and then be in a position to support a family. Then I'll go find somebody, get in a serious relationship and start building a family. I was really focused on the kind of business I wanted to build, the kind of people I wanted to be with, and the kind of culture I wanted to have. I was really focused on setting my life up financially to be in a good place to live the way I wanted to live. And because of that hardship, I said, I'm not having much fun at work anymore. Let me get out and have fun outside of work. That's when, in the midst of all this, I met the woman who's now my wife. We got married a week after I sold the business. We moved
Congratulations.
to Indianapolis and I started with a great company up there. What I learned in that beginning was that's where kind of the seed got planted, my passion for people. I'm really passionate about people. By the time I ended up selling that business, I was so much more passionate about the people that were working with us, about their personal and professional growth, about our partners, about our vendors, about our customers and clients, than I was about the inventory, than I was about the products we were selling. By the time I left, I looked at that stuff as it's just a bunch of plastic stuff,
Yeah.
but the people were gold to me. So went to Indianapolis, got married, moved to Indianapolis. And the amazing part of the story for me was, a few months after that, I'm in a great job doing well financially. I have a great job. My wife has a great job. And everything I'd spent almost a decade trying to build, my definition of success, I'd spent almost a decade trying to build. I looked around and I had it.
Mhm.
And I was so sure it was coming through the business. And I looked at it as such a deep failure and I had it. And some of those things I had not because of anything I had done. And that was probably that realization is what kind of led me to this idea of, I can decouple, you know, the only success you ever taste, the only enjoyment you ever have or can ever experience is because of, at that time it was just grit. It's just hard work, push through
Mhm.
it, get it done. That wasn't the case. I had a whole lot of what I was trying to build because of relationship, because of what my wife brought to the table, because of what we are able to do together, because of the company that I went in and decided to work for as an employee. So that's been my story. While I was in Indianapolis, ended up I've worked for small companies, I've owned small companies, I've worked for $1 billion companies, but we had the opportunity to come back to Louisville and I got into marketing. It's so interesting when you are an entrepreneur for a decade.
Yeah.
And then you go off and you're like, who's going to hire me? What are my skills? What do I do? I guess I build businesses. So marketing felt natural. So I came back to Louisville, started a marketing company. Then along the way, I really got on this personal and professional development train. I started hiring coaches in my own life. I knew that I was going to be a coach one day. And just before the pandemic hit, I really started down that path. And the pandemic ended up being an accelerant for building my coaching business. So I've taken all of that experience and now I pour it into clients. And you described it well. I work with entrepreneurs, I work with leaders, and I work with ambitious professionals to build the businesses and the lives they really want. And that's important to me. Some people say it sounds fuzzy or open-ended, but everybody has their own definitions of success if they choose to. Everybody has their own definition of success. And I want to help people step into that personally and professionally.
It's not so fuzzy, I think, to help people find what they want. But people talk about want all the time.
Yeah.
I want this, I want that. But really, do they know what they want? And I'd argue that, based on this focus group of one over here, I would argue that that people don't always know what they want. Really, they think they know what they want. You even said that you thought you had everything that you really were looking for. And then you looked around and you said, well, you were able to decouple that from those years and years of hard work and grit and labor. Maybe that all wasn't necessary, was the sense I was getting from what you're saying is, maybe you just turned around and said, was it necessary to make all those sacrifices and kind of shut myself away into my deep into my business for that long when that wasn't really the only thing that has produced the success that I have? I mean, clearly you have a lot of the successes that you have had because of your experiences with your business, but it was the relationships that you built. It was meeting your wife. It was the circles that you connected with that seemed to have brought the most happiness. And maybe that changed your definition of what you wanted, right?
Yeah,
I think what I was really trying to say though is that it's that point about want is, I think, really underrated when people hear it. They think that, it sounds fluffy.
Yeah.
But if you can help people find what they want, the life that they want, first to define that life that they want, right, is a effort or a journey in and of itself. So that's where I think we were talking earlier once. I mean, helping people find what they want, they need some help on guidance on that journey. How did you really, get to that point where you knew that that's what you wanted to help people with? Like, people are looking for something they really want, the life that they really want. Like, what kind of lives do people want?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And how did you decide? Yeah.
It's a good question. Freedom is a value of mine. It's what drove me to entrepreneurship. I wanted to work for myself in the freedom therein. And in so many ways, I had a lot of it. But in just as many ways, I kept myself chained up and caged up. When we talk about the life that we want, we get so many messages. We all get so many messages about what success looks like, right? Hard work, making a lot of money, having the big title, having the corner offices, selling businesses, getting venture capital, getting investments. Like you mentioned Shark Tank. Shark Tank has a very clear definition of what success looks like. And so we chase these things. We all chase these versions of success. And for a lot of the people I work with, and listen, I work with everybody from people that are starting brand new companies because they're getting out there and they're doing it, to people that lead staffs of several hundred people. I work with managers and directors and executives in Fortune 500 companies. So these aren't college kids kind of figuring out what they want. But we chase these versions of success because it's all we know. And nobody has ever stopped to ask the question, but is it your definition of success? But what does success look like to you, right? There are so many shoulds that we're chasing. I should want this. I should want to get promoted to the next level. I should want to grow my business, to sell my business. Nobody ever said it's okay if you want to build, sometimes we talk about lifestyle businesses as if there's something wrong with that. But What's wrong with having a business that pays you incredibly well, lets you and your family live the life you want, and lets you show up at your kids' soccer games, lets you be home to greet your kids from the bus, or do whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's gardening, sports, hiking, whatever that is, whatever is important to you. So
Yeah.
the first step in my own work was figuring out what I wanted. There were so many things I thought I was supposed to be as an entrepreneur, as a Black man, as a father. Probably this really all starts funny that father just popped into my mind because it probably started there. Probably started in a restaurant when my first son was
Yeah.
very young. And I remember I was watching him, look, he was a, 1.5, 2 year old little boy, right? He's running around, he's having his fun. And I remember, I would tell him, come sit down, come sit down, come sit down. And I come from a military family. My dad was a captain in the
Mm-hmm.
Marine Corps. Like discipline was a thing. Right. So if we had nothing else, we were going to be disciplined, and he would yank us out of any restaurant, and we were he didn't play. So I remember as my son would be too loud or be too active, I would think to myself, I'd look at all these strangers sitting around me and think, what are they thinking? Come sit down, come sit down, come sit down. Because I had it in my mind that this is what a good parent does. He tells his kid to come sit down, right? His kids are well behaved. They're sitting at the table. They're not running all over the place. And then quite honestly, I asked myself, why in the hell am I doing that? Do I really care if he's running around the table, as long as he's not bothering anybody else?
Yeah.
Why is this bothering me? And I realized that I was basing the things I did on the expectations I believed other people had for me and the definitions of what a good father would do in this situation. And literally in that restaurant, in that moment, I was able to let it all go. Like my definition of, in case you're curious, my definition of being a good father for me, and it could be totally different for you and for all of your listeners, for me is to be a guide for my kids. I want to be a guide. I want to be somebody that walks beside them and allows them to walk through life and chase whatever they want to do, but I make their journey just a little bit easier.
Surprisingly, that sounds like being a coach.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so. I'm able to release the other definitions. I'm able to release the unspoken expectation of what good fathers do or don't because I have my own definition. And when I saw the power of having my own definition in parenting, I wanted my own definition in everything. And that's what I've been doing is relentlessly chasing and building the life that I want and doing it with such intentionality.
Yeah.
And one thing, so often we start talking about the life that we want, and it can be heard as not being financially motivated. Look, I'm building a business now. I'm building a coaching business that I am financially motivated for to do well. Now, money's not my main motivator. That is not a sole definition of success or a sole benchmark, but I owe it to me, my family, to make this business successful. I owe it to my clients to still be around and do these things.
So many people are ashamed of the money.
Yeah.
It's an uncultured thing. How are they raised? And there's a certain point of pride, I think, for folks who are raised by, maybe even military families or people who are raised by people in service of some kind, blue collar families. I grew up in a very blue collar town. My mom was a teacher, and for some, I never got a really good grip on what money really meant. And I think that I kind of grew up a lot with this whole idea that you had to be a little bit ashamed of having money. Even though I've never I've never really felt ashamed of having any money. If I've ever had any, I've never felt ashamed of it, I will say. But I feel like that might've hampered my kind of pursuit of money. And I've learned since, and especially, in the recent couple of years, and even this past year, that the pursuit of money in and of itself is valueless. Like it's a neutral thing, right? Money is a tool, just like anything else. The money is a tool that allows you to live the life that you want and provide the life that you want for others. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to get some money and be a rich person and lord it over everyone. I mean, if that's what money means to you, then yeah, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But it's a tool to live the life that you want, really.
Yeah, and it's something that you're absolutely right. It's something that doesn't have to be judged, and oftentimes when we find ourselves making money decisions, one of the questions I often ask people is, okay, great. Well, how much is enough?
Yeah.
Right? Because if we honestly look back at our lives, enough for a lot of us has been a moving goalpost forever, right? Because every time we've reached the point that we said that would be enough, we just move the goalpost, move the goalpost, move the goalpost. So it's always interesting to really dig in and ask, okay, you want to make more money. You want to do more, what's behind it? And that's what I do in my coaching with just about everything is
Yeah.
I just zoom right past the surface because I want to get to the core of the issue. I want to understand what are the motivators, what are the drivers, and make sure that people are highly aligned with those motivations and that the reasons they have for doing things are truly theirs. And look, we all have money things. We all have money baggage. We all have money messages that we've carried around for a kid that are impacting the way that we show up. You mentioned people who are almost embarrassed by making too much money. One of the things that I deal with often, even coaches are terrible at this, is they think, hey, I'm doing this good thing. I'm helping people, and people shouldn't have to pay a lot of money to get help. So they don't want to charge people. The number of coaches conversations that I've had with people who don't want to charge or unwilling to charge enough because they feel like there is something inherently evil in charging money. I can't do good and be paid well for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a load of crap.
It's a societal kind of, what is it? It's BS. It's a belief system, right?
Yeah.
It is that a limiting belief that has been placed upon you in some way, somewhere you've learned that, picked that up along the way, parents, friends, whatever it is, it somehow got inculcated in you. And the fact of the matter is, if you're providing a service that somebody is willing to pay, like a good service, if you're doing, something honest, ethical, real, that has value to somebody will give you that value for it. You shouldn't be worried about that. I mean, here I am talking about that where, I would love to be, to have more of this or more of that or more of this. I mean, but, how I go about, kind of planning my own financial future is on me.
That's right.
And, I got some crypto.
Yeah.
There you go. I mean, that's like I play around a little bit. The point is that I respect people's view of money. And if I was offering a service that, I could charge, a certain amount for, I wouldn't want to hate myself for charging money for that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of the things that you always see is this idea that everybody's saying, how should I treat my friends? What kind of discount should I give my friends? And business owners get in trouble and they come to this place where a friend is asking for a favor or looking for a deal. And it's always fascinating. The question I always ask around this is, why shouldn't your friend pay you more? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, I should give my friend a discount. And I said, why is the burden on you? This is a money conversation. Why shouldn't your friend who's watched you hustle, build, grind, and do whatever it took to get to where you are, value what you do more and want to pay you not only market price, but above market price, right? Why is the burden on you who's providing the service to lower your price to satisfy a friend's need? Why do you have to carry that whole burden?
Yeah. I was just thinking I'm going to write that down, but then I remembered we're recording this. So that is brilliant. I mean, it's true. You tend to do these friends and family thing, but you're right. If they have seen you, are you ashamed of the value that you're bringing to the table? Right? It's a good question. I mean, I don't want to lose my friends necessarily, but it's a very good way of looking at it. You talked about want. We've talked about money as the answer to what do you want, but I think we went down that road a little far. But what I wanted to get to is what are the kinds of things that you're finding out that people want, like once you dig past that through your coaching.
Yeah, people want to be happy. People want to spend time with family. People want to live a life of balance. Like, people aren't scared to work hard. More than anything, though, people want to know they're enough. That's what they're chasing. They want to know that they're enough. And they open so many doors through life trying to get an answer to that question, right? They want to know if they're enough for their family. They want to know if they're enough for their friends. They want to know if they're enough for their parents. And they want to know if they're enough for themselves.
I'm just pondering that for a second because a while ago I was in a coaching conversation with a very good friend of mine, and I was the coachee, so he was the coach, and he was like basically practicing his coaching. He was getting his certification, and he needed to do some pro bono, and I was more than happy to raise my hand. And he was asking me about like, what is it that you're afraid of, really? Like, I think that was one of the things that he felt that I had a fear of something, and He wanted to get to like what it was that I was afraid of in some way, right? And it came to pass that the conversation went like, well, I was afraid of not being able to give my family what they want. Like I was afraid of a failure in some ways. And I've talked about that on the show before. Like being afraid of failure is paralyzing,
Sure.
you know? But I was afraid of like that others would be ashamed of me as what it turned out to be. It was a really deep conversation.
Yeah.
And we dug into that for a little while, as you might imagine. But like, what would it be that would turn that shame around? Like, why would people be ashamed? Or why, and I thought that, well, I didn't want like my wife and her family to be like, oh, why did he ever marry? Why did she ever marry that guy? Right? I didn't want my mom to think, why did he choose to go to Japan for so long? Gosh, his life went in the wrong direction. Maybe she still does think that. I don't know. We'll find out. But the point is, right? You can doubt everything that you do, and it just causes this kind of cancerous self-inspection rather than healthy mind shift.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's the power of coaching. I think that's the power of somebody asking you those deep questions. Nobody has ever hired me and said, hey, Daryl, I was thinking the other day that I might not be enough and I want to hire you as a coach to really explore that. No, I market myself as a business coach. People come to me knowing that they want to develop a new marketing plan. They want to double the size of their business. They want to position things for an exit, right? They have very tangible business goals when they meet me. They want to go from 1 location to 3. I'm just going through some of the clients I'm working with now. And they're very tangible business goals. Yeah. And we chase those and we put those in place and we explore those things and we're able to pull out the wisdom from their experiences, from their education, from their relationships that drive towards meeting those goals. And I'm willing to bet if you asked anybody I've ever worked with, they would say, hey, it was great. Daryl helped me achieve the exact thing I came in the door asking for. What I didn't ask for has proved to be so much more valuable. And that is learning more about themselves, stepping into their own awareness, understanding the impact and the power of choice, the way they show up for themselves, for their family, for their teams. And just the awareness and the freedom that comes with that is by default ends up being a part of everything we do, even though it's nothing anybody ever comes in asking for.
Well, that's the beauty of this self-exploration, right?
Yeah.
And, to have a kind of, to start to develop a curiosity about yourself. I think that's a term that is so undervalued, curiosity, and just the idea of exploration. And it leads to so many other things. So when we met originally, we were talking about creativity and because that's one of my things. I'm really passionate about helping other people be creative, and I try to do that for myself. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing the podcast, but it's also something I try to help others do and see creative opportunities, whether that's to write something new or approach a problem in a different way, or just, at the job, try to inject some excitement and something interesting that's a little bit different by being more creative about the work that you have to do. And, creativity it's not one of those fluffy words because it can mean like a lot of different things. But to me, it just means, making something that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
But when you kind of dial it back a little bit, it has to start. It can't be like in a vacuum. You can't just be, okay, I'm going to be creative today. It's got to be backed by, I think anyway, by curiosity. And being curious, something that's knocked out of us when we're kids. Your son running around the restaurant. Why is he running around the restaurant? He's curious.
Yeah.
And, thank goodness he has a dad like you who's like, you know what? Who's not bothering anybody. It turns out your aha moment was probably a pivotal moment in his development of curiosity. Because how many kids are going to get knocked back and said, and sit down, son, sit down. And they're going to think that, okay, I can't explore. I can't go. When I go and I look for things that are interesting to me, I'm going to get smacked down. So that sits with you. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I'm thinking that might be something, right?
I'm over here smiling to myself because I'm like, man, so this is what happened the last time we talked. This is why we hit it off so well, is I just think we're highly aligned. So curiosity is a word that I have been playing with deeply for the past 2 months. I think I agree with you. I think it's a foundational word. And I was in a coaching session. It was actually in a mastermind group, and we're all talking. And this idea, this image came into my head, and it was curiosity with the line under it, and judgment. And I said, curiosity over judgment. And I told the group, I said, I don't know what this means, but I feel like it's something. Like I could literally feel my body vibrating with this image, with this thought in my head. And I haven't been able to let it go. And I spent the last 2 months pressure testing this idea of curiosity over judgment. My hypothesis is that, and please don't hear me demonizing judgment. Judgment serves us. We need judgment. Judgment keeps us safe. Judgment helps us choose things that are going to help us provide for our family. Like there's a place for judgment. But I also think we all carry such a hefty amount of judgment, of unnecessary judgment, right? And look, we're coming off the pandemic, right? We just went through a political season, right? Racial tensions are at an all-time high, right? And we see judgment everywhere we go, social media and everywhere else. So I have a hypothesis that judgment and curiosity can't exist in the same space. And when we bring judgment to the table, we're crushing any opportunity to be curious, right? Because when something happens, it's almost second nature for us to show up and judge it, right? So, what happens if instead we choose to be curious about it? What doesn't happen if instead we choose to show up and be curious about it, right? We don't make the assumptions, right? We don't make the interpretations, right? We get the real story and we're able to truly connect. And you bring up creativity. Creativity is a higher energy level thing, right? Creativity, collaboration, enlightenment, some of those things that we find at these higher energy levels, you can access when you're showing up to life curiously, when you're showing up to work curiously. When you show up into spaces judgmentally, that's a lower energy level thing, right? And here's what we know about energy. When I talk about energy, it's am I showing up with a we win attitude versus an I win versus a you win? Like, what is the attitude? What is the kind of energy we're bringing into our spaces, our relationships, our work? When we show up judgmentally, it is damn near impossible for us to bring the kind of creativity to create, as you described it, into a space, right? So I'm willing to bet that by showing up with more curiosity and less judgment, you're going to automatically tap into your most creative self.
My mind is a little blown over here because I've been playing around with these same similar concepts, but certainly curiosity. I really do want to dig into this whole idea of curiosity over judgment. I think it's elegant. It's an elegant way of putting the whole problem. And when you think about the situations we face in our day-to-day life, at work, in your own job, or in the company that you own, how many times are we out there being being judgmental?
Yeah.
I mean, and how many of the issues that we have can be certainly conflict, I think, can be mapped directly to being judgmental. You know, you go in with a preconceived notion, you hold somebody up against a standard that maybe they're not aware that there's a standard that they're being held up against, but you know, it is by nature antagonistic, or you know, it's holding something up against something.
Yeah.
Measure, you know, it's a way to measure. And curiosity is not measuring. Curiosity is releasing. It's exploring.
Yeah.
You know, it's asking why, really, fundamentally. And without that judgment to hamper it, you're right. I don't think they can survive in the same space.
Yeah. And what do we judge, right? We all judge the same three things, right? We judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge situations, right? Now,
Yeah.
if you find yourself in danger, right? If you're out in the woods and suddenly you see a big furry animal rolling around, like, please judge that situation, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Judgment will
times.
serve you in that moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? But it's such a good question for us to always be asking ourselves, right? How am I showing up? And if I do have strong emotions, if I feel it in my body that, hey, I have a judgment, or I can't believe somebody did that, or I can't believe this or that, or whatever it may be, how is this serving me? Is this serving me? And if it is, great. But if it's not,
Yeah.
play around with choosing curiosity instead
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
seeing what gifts might be waiting for you on the other side.
Well, yeah. I mean, clearly you do need to be, you do need to have judgment in your skill set.
Yep.
You know, making a decision requires some judgment, right? There's a moment at which you have to say, okay, the curiosity is going to stop now. We have to move on. We have to make a choice.
That's right.
You know, but I don't think that you can be a successful, I don't think you can get what you want and do what you want without curiosity to power that, or maybe you can't know what you want without that curiosity to power that. It's an interesting place to go,
Yeah.
Now with your clients and with the people that you're talking to, you said this is something you've been thinking about for the last couple of months, but is this something like, what inspired that? Is there a lot of stuff happening with your clients that's?
So, honestly, there's a lot of stuff happening with me. So
Okay.
while I do coach other people, I also have a coach. I have multiple coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I am passionate about my own personal and professional development. And I'm always pushing that envelope. And judgment has gotten in the way for me my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Traditionally, people would have described me as somebody who, I know the right way, right? There's one way, it's the right way. And if I hear a leader leading in a different way, that's not the right way. It should be this way. I told you about my early partner that I ended up buying out.
Yeah.
Right. It was because we had very different leadership styles. And I spent 3 years, not 3 years, I spent 2 years trying to convince him that my way was right. He spent 2 years trying to convince me that his way was right. Right. We both were so sure. There was no curiosity.
Yeah.
It was the only curiosity was, what do I have to say or do to convince him that I'm right? And now looking back, I realized that neither of us was right. Right. Either leadership style could have been successful in that company and could have taken that company to new heights. Maybe they couldn't have coexisted, but either one would have been fine. So if we both would have shown up a little more curiously, I wonder where we could have landed.
Yeah.
So it was my own development that kind of led me into this commitment to start showing up and asking more questions and not being so sure. In my own house with my own wife, she would get on the kids for something and, well, she's getting on them differently than the way I would get on them. So I would have to say something. Right. So she felt judged all the time. So letting go of that just started to open up things in my own life. And then when this idea hit, as I started pressure testing it, I brought it up with a lot of clients, and it has never failed to create an aha moment. And that's not me creating the moment. It's me proposing. It's me asking questions around what impact, what judgment are you bringing into this situation? What impact is that having on the situation? What would showing up with more curiosity look like, and how might that serve you? And that walks them down a path where the way they want, the conversation they want to have, the way they want to engage with clients, with partners, with negotiation, and everything else is so different that it creates aha moments left and right. So when I say I've been pressure testing it, I've yet to find a situation where somebody says, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me, or that doesn't serve me, or there's nothing there. In fact, and I know by the time we air this, it already have happened, but I'm doing a talk answering the call to curious leadership for a group of about 500 leaders. There's an organization here in Louisville called Leadership Louisville. It's going to be a recorded session, so you can go out, look up Louisville Leadership Center's website, and you'll be able to find it. But yeah, I mean, that's the next step, is what role does curiosity play in leadership, and what impact can showing up as a curious leader truly have?
It seems that, I'm hearing this again and again from people in different ways: the curious leader, the conscientious leader, the exploratory leader. Like, just there's this quality of leadership that isn't associated with leadership, and people are trying to understand why it isn't and why it should be. Because I think people have assumed that leadership means decisions. Leadership means strength, right? Leadership means, more and more people understand, yes, it means authenticity, but it also, I think a lot of leaders, people who are in leadership roles, believe that their role is to judge.
Yeah.
But to be a curious leader, that opens up a whole new world for you. It potentially could. It's just like, I'm listening to this, I'm to myself speak, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm thinking, I really need to approach my own team differently at times. I tried, I believe I'm a curious person, but maybe what's happening at the moment, you don't always give it as much intent. You're not as intentful about it. You're not as purposeful about going into it with curiosity as maybe you should be. So I'm taking that away here as a big learning for Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, one of my dirty little secrets is I do this podcast just so I get free coaching. There it is.
Yeah. Well, and look, give yourself a ton of grace, right? Because you're running the default program. When we show up judgmentally, it's what society has taught us, right? I just did a team cohesiveness workshop for a group of 29 people. And it's amazing. I was talking to their leader and they said, look, I have an incredible team. Before the pandemic, we were hitting on all cylinders. We hung out together. We liked each other. There wasn't a lot of tension in the office. And ever since we've come back, we just can't find that groove again. Mm-hmm. And even before we did the session, I said, well, of course not, right? Everybody's been at home, right? Yeah. What have we been? We've been watching the news. We've been on social media more than ever. We've been in all these highly charged, highly judgmental spaces, right? And now we go back to work. We're not on social media. We don't have the news on in the background. We don't have all the other things. Where does that judgment go? It has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
That's our default program. So, and as leaders, it's what we've been taught. So we all have our default programs, So I say give yourself some grace because, we don't show up to these situations saying, hey, I'm going to be curious today, and that's just who I'm going to be. It's intentionality. One of the things I always say, freedom is a big value of mine. And one of the things I always say is, I used to say choice leads to freedom. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that us choosing our definition of leadership, us choosing our definition of success, us choosing to show up with curiosity, right? Choice leads to freedom. But it hit me, I'd say 18 months or so ago that, but we can't ever get to choice if we're not aware that there's even a choice to be made. And that's true for so many of us because we run our default programs and we do these things in our subconscious and we receive information and we judge situations. We do everything we do. And it's the program running in the background. These aren't conscious choices. So the cool thing about you creating this brilliant vehicle for you to get free coaching is you're bringing some of the choices available to you into your awareness.
Yeah.
Right now you're talking about, I get to choose how I show up for my team. So you're aware that now a choice is available to you. Why wouldn't you show up judgmentally? Before you were exposed to that idea the first time, you didn't know there was any other way.
You're talking about, default programming. I mean, we mentioned earlier the belief system. It's all part and parcel of that. And how much this year, this crazy year has either rewired people or has affected that default programming. I spoke with a great neuroscientist named Michael Netzley way a while back. It seems like forever ago, but it's probably only 5 or 6 months ago on the show. But Michael was talking about the default network, right? Yeah. That's in your brain, and how with over time and with behaviors and the way that you kind of train yourself, you can overwrite your default network, but it doesn't go away, right? Like you can rewire yourself in many ways. You can learn new behaviors, but your default is there. So to be aware of this and to understand what that means gives you a whole world of choices, by itself. Like if I know, okay, my default has been to be judgmental. I mean, maybe that's not my true default. I'm just saying, for example, right?
Sure.
Then I know okay, I'm going to go into a situation. I have to be aware. I might be judgmental here. Let me approach this from a position of curiosity. Let me think about this for a second. So it's really useful and important to remember that. And one other thing that came to mind as you were talking, and I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but have you ever seen the Apple TV show Ted Lasso or heard of it?
Not. I have a client. If he hears this and I have not watched it, I actually made a commitment to him that, you know what, by our next call, I will watch that show because every time have you watched it yet? So I have not.
It's so good. Well, season 2 is coming in July, so you'll have a nice load of binging to do if you wait a bit. But so by the time this show airs, we should already be through season 2 of Ted Lasso. I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan. He speaks, in wisdom that is, just unexpected and out of control. But there's one part, and I'm not going to spoil it for you too much. But I'm going to spoil a little bit because he says he's playing darts with basically an antagonist. And the antagonist is making some assumptions about Ted because Ted's like a country bumpkin, right? He comes off like one.
Yeah.
and he's a fish out of water. And here he is, this guy from Kansas in the middle of an English pub throwing darts, right? Ted's throwing terrible darts, right? And they're competing. They're having this game, and there's a wager. So the antagonist says, basically, he thinks he's got him and is insulting the hell out of Ted. And Ted's just smiling, doing his thing. And then finally, at the end, Ted switches hands. He starts throwing right-handed. He's just boom, 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 just wipes this guy out. And then he says something to the effect of, and I'm going to get it wrong because my powers of memorization are terrible, but he says something to the effect of, be curious. If you are curious, be curious instead of judgmental. And I don't think he used the word judgmental, but because if you were curious, you might have asked me, hey, Ted, what'd you do when you were a kid? Hey, Ted, did you ever play darts before? Hey, Ted, where'd you learn to throw? And I would have told you, yeah, my daddy took me play darts every Sunday of my entire life, and he, because he was a killer darts player. Curiosity, right? But instead you were judgmental and you made some assumptions. You never asked me one single question.
Yeah.
So you never got to know me. This is such a small scene. It's an important scene, but it's like, yes, that's exactly what I think. And it's exactly what you're saying about curiosity and judgment. It's exactly about that default program, the default network we have. I mean, it's all wrapped up into Ted Lasso. So go watch it. For sure. The other thing I wanted to ask you before we go, and this has flown by, Daryl. I'm just like so excited that we were able to finally do this. But your coaching business has, you said, accelerated during the pandemic. Speaking with you now, and also, I've talked with many coaches. It feels like you've been doing it forever. Like so it reinforces what you said earlier, that it's really something that you've wanted to do, that you've known you've wanted to do. You're natural. But what is the coaching certification that you got? How did you learn? What was the process that you went through?
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing that.
No, not at all. It's a great question. And I think it's an important question. As you said, you've talked to a few coaches, so you've probably heard it before then. The coaching industry is a bit of the wild, wild west in that you don't have to be certified. Anybody can hang a shingle, call themselves a coach tomorrow. And I'm sure, and in fact, I know there are great coaches out there who don't have a single certification to their name. How do I know? Because I've hired them and they've helped me tremendously. That being said, it was important for me. I always felt like I had the skills. I've always had the desire to help. I thought coaching was all about telling people what to do. And while I couldn't always figure it out in my own life, I thought I was great at telling other people what to do in theirs. And hence, it made so much sense for me to be a coach. So you can imagine my surprise when the very first day of the coach training program, I'm sitting in Charlotte, North Carolina. And within the first 5 minutes, somebody says, let's talk about what coaching is not. They said, coaching is not telling people what to do. And that was a holy smokes moment because I paid a lot of money. I committed to a lot of time. And that was the beginning. But it's so much better, right? Coaching is about helping people access the wisdom, the intuition, the answers that are already deep within. So many of my clients, it's funny because you can't turn it off, right? You'll be working with a client. They'll tell you about a situation. You'll think in the back of your mind, oh, this is what they should do, or this is, something they should explore. But you show up curiously, you ask the questions, and what they come up with and what they come back with is so much better. And it's such a better path than you could have come up with if you would have just showed them what they do. So coaching is really about accessing that. I did my training through IPEC, so the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And for me, it was really about the frameworks. I wanted the coaching frameworks. I wanted the tools. And I didn't know it, but I really appreciated how much practice there was, how much life coaching there was through the program. But I wanted to take those frameworks and then understand them and then make them my own. And that's what I've been able to do. Is there are things that I do today in my coaching practice that they would tell you, well, that's not traditional coaching. Truthfully, what I do is a combination of coaching and consulting. I have a ton of business experience. I have a ton of marketing experience. Sometimes my clients don't. So we tap into whatever is going to best serve the client with whatever the goal we're trying to achieve is.
Yeah. And some coaches have echoed your sentiment exactly. There's a continuum between like psychoanalysis, coaching, and consulting. And coaching is focusing on the present and, exactly what you said, drawing out the wisdom that people have within. Consulting is is telling people what to do, right? It's, what are you going to do next? And let's talk about what's going to, how to fix this problem. And there's a blur. It's oftentimes it's the right thing to do sometimes to be a coach consultant, as some people have said. I don't know. Is there a preferred method that you use? Is there a
Depends on the client.
Yeah.
It really does. I would say, and it depends on the need.
Mhm.
I just hired a coach, and instead of, because a big part of my business, aside from coaching people one-on-one, is I facilitate groups, trainings, and workshops,
Mhm.
but I'm also doing a lot more speaking. And I'm very natural speaking in front of people, but I thought this is a skill I want to sharpen.
Yeah.
I don't want a traditional coach who is going to say you have the answers within. I hired a mentor coach who has been on stages, who has helped other people get to stages, and who can help me learn the processes to put speeches together in the most effective way and to really deliver a product that the client is worthy of receiving, or that I'm worthy of giving to the client. I want to make sure that I show up for the people in the room in a big way. And
Yeah.
by hiring somebody to walk me into that. So it's really dependent on the client's need. And look, sometimes the answer is heavier on the consulting side. Sometimes the answer is pure coaching. Oftentimes it's a mixture of both.
Yeah. Well, whatever your answer is to people, I mean, they're very fortunate to be working with you. I know that you're doing a great job. I love following your success here. I'm so glad you're on the show. What's next for Daryl? Are you gonna? You said you wanted to do some speaking. Are there books forthcoming? What's happening? What's the near future for you?
Yeah, I think what's immediate for me is continuing to grow this coaching business in a number of ways. There are doors that are opening for me that I couldn't have planned if I wanted to. I keep showing up in a very big way, and some really amazing opportunities come from the facilitating standpoint, from the coaching, partnering with other organizations who are looking to bring coaching components to the work they're already doing. I do want to build out some group programs. I want to build out some courses and some different things. The book is intriguing, so I'll have to tap into some of your experience and your wisdom on how to take the creativity we can talk about in conversation with this and turn it into a book. So that feels really intimidating to me right now, but it is certainly not off the table.
Yeah. It's a big deal. I haven't finished mine. So, I will certainly commiserate with you. I don't know if you want me as a coach, but I'll certainly commiserate with you. Look, I'm excited for you, whichever direction you decide to go and whatever's happening. Listen, anybody out there, if you clearly have heard Daryl for the last hour, there should be no doubt that this is somebody that you should talk to and hang out with. If not, if you need a coach, certainly somebody you can ask about that. Look up Daryl Sweeney, DerylSweeny. His name will be spelled properly in the episode title. Check him out on LinkedIn. Go to DarylSweeney.com. Where else can people find you, Daryl? Is there anything else out there? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think start on the website.
Yeah.
It has links to all the socials. I spend some time on social media. I don't spend a ton of time there, but I do like to put out content. I do like to put out thoughts and ideas. I like to ask questions that get people reflecting on their life, their business, their situations, and just think about things from a different angle. So I do a lot of that through video.
Terrific. And is there anything else that you would ask our listeners to check out or do? Is anything else on your mind before we wrap it up?
No, it's nothing more to check out. I would challenge everybody to do a lot of the things we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
What role does curiosity play in your life? How are you defining success? And is the success that you're chasing truly yours? And if it's not, don't get discouraged. If you've been chasing the corner office because it feels like there's something wrong in saying that's not what you really want, just know we've all been there and we go through it and it's part of the process. But be brave enough to ask yourself the question. And then once you're able to answer it for yourself, live into your answer with everything you have.
That is awesome. Great advice and a good way to wrap things up. Last word, is there a charity that you think that people should look into?
You're a good man. You're a good man. So, I mentioned earlier, my son has cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a life-shortening disease. When he was born, they told us that he would live till 37. As you can tell, I am a very driven guy. I take, my biggest responsibility is being a dad to my two boys.
Yeah.
So 37 doesn't work for me. Yeah. So we really got to work along with some other families. My wife and I started a charity called Cure CF, and we're passionate about figuring out and supporting the science that is going to allow those born and living with cystic fibrosis to live full, healthy lives. And we're well on the way. We are a 100% volunteer-run organization. We've raised about $3 million over the past 5 years. We have brought clinical trials to Louisville, Kentucky. We've gotten our local clinic into therapeutic. There's some amazing work going on. And people love what we're doing because we don't keep a dime. Everything goes out the door. We have no employees. We have no offices. It all goes to support the research. So if you want to help save some lives, especially some younger lives, and keep families together, check out curecf.com.
So it's just curecf.com.
Yep.
curecf.com. Awesome. Well, look, you're doing excellent work for your clients. You're doing great work for your family. Excellent, of course, with your son and others who have cystic fibrosis. It's a great cause, everybody. CF.com. Check it out. Help out the cause and give Daryl a shout. I mean, and check out his content. It is killer. Obviously, this podcast has just been a taste of it. But dude, I'm very happy you've been here. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate the space. And so much so that I'm going to get our URL right. It's CureCF Inc. CureCFInc.com. You asked the question. You said, see, you showed up curiously. You asked the question. You said, is it just CureCF? And that made me say, is it just CureCF? CureCFInc.com.
CureCFInc.com.
You got it.
There it is. Well, we'll get it right in the notes for sure. But thanks, Daryl. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Dan.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.